Putin says he's re-established his authority. The ruling class in Russia is skeptical. After the dramatic attempted mutiny by mercenary commander Yevgeny Prigozhin, Vladimir Putin tried this week to show he was firmly in control. But many influential people in the Kremlin and the business world don't believe it. When Prigozhin and his column of tanks and fighters came within 124 miles of Moscow, they were allowed to retreat to neighboring Belarus without facing criminal charges, prompting comparisons to a banana republic. One commentator compared Putin's invasion of Ukraine last year to the Russian president's botched response to the uprising. Many insiders believe the dramatic events have destroyed Putin's carefully crafted image as the protector of stability. They said the turmoil proved the 70-year-old leader is losing touch and power he once had over events, and they spoke anonymously because of the sensitivity of the topic. The economic and business elite have been worried and alarmed about the country's direction since the invasion in February 2022, when Putin was trying to reassert his control, and the recent turmoil has only increased those feelings, they said. It caused concern among some that further repression might occur in Russia. While everyone could see that Prigozhin was losing it, they probably didn't expect him to resort to physical violence. Yevgeny Minchenko, a political consultant in Moscow, said that it had. Since it is obvious that force is important, all the elite groups are trying to build up their own security resource. Putin's public attempts to appear in control of the situation came across as foolish to some, they said, and only served to highlight the event's revelation that his leadership was ineffective and weak. Despite widespread concern among the elite, those with knowledge of the situation have said there is no viable alternative to Putin. Despite the shock, the people said, many still view Putin as a stable leader. After losing many of their international connections due to the war and sanctions, they continue to rely on his patronage and protection to ensure their prosperity and safety. On Tuesday, Putin met with senior military and security officials in the Kremlin, where he reportedly thanked them sternly for their support. Prigozhin, a former protege whose rebellion he blamed for the deaths of troops trying to stop it, was allowed to leave without punishment, but he did not explain why. He instead claimed that his government had paid Wagner over $3 billion in the past year, without being able to account for the money's use. Putin claimed that the swift end of the 24-hour revolt demonstrated Russians' unity behind him, but video of cheering crowds greeted Prigozhin and his fighters as they withdrew from a city in the south they had occupied disproved this. The president stayed on the phone with friendly leaders, including Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, to try to explain what had happened. However, his closest ally, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, dared to publicly poke fun at the overconfident Russian leader. Lukashenko, who played a key role in brokering the deal that diffused the uprising, admitted as much to local media on Tuesday in a frank postmortem about his role in the affair. Putin and I were under the impression that the problem would resolve itself. I wasn't under that impression myself, but that's beside the point. However, it did not disappear by itself. According to sources familiar with the situation, there were indications that a group of hardliners who agreed with Prigozhin's criticisms of the military leadership for not prosecuting the war in Ukraine aggressively enough were mounting a push for greater influence. This was not a coup attempt, but it certainly opens the door for a possibility like this in the near term, said Alina Polyakova, president of the Center for European Policy Analysis in Washington. However, there was mounting opposition from those who advocated for a massive expansion of the war effort, similar to what the Soviet Union did during their Great Patriotic War. Putin has so far resisted those measures, preferring instead to shield Russian society from the war's effects in the hope of maintaining public support. We've seen only the first episode so far and a sequel will follow, said Nikolai Petrov, a visiting fellow at the SWP think tank in Berlin. The Escalationists Party, led by Prigozhin, will profit from this situation because it will attempt to restart the disastrous war, weak Putin or no weak Putin. It's looking increasingly unlikely that we can return to the status quo that benefited Putin, he said. The Kremlin has, for the time being, maintained its public backing of Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, a close Putin ally and the primary public target of Prigozhin. TASS reported on Tuesday that National Guard chief and longtime Putin ally Viktor Zolotov announced that the National Guard would be given tanks and other heavy weapons. He failed to explain how this strategy squared with claims from the Kremlin that further unrest was unlikely. However, according to Zolotov, this is a very acute issue now. Speaker of the lower house Vyacheslav Volodin has ordered an investigation into which state officials and corporate executives have fled the country during the crisis, and he has called for the public shaming of those who have done so. Ultranationalist Alexander Dugin, whose profile has grown in the wake of the conflict, wrote in a commentary published on Tuesday that if Putin doesn't make personnel changes in several key agencies, the situation will only get worse. He warned that if nothing was done to prevent a recurrence of the disaster, it would be fatal this time.